Good evening, everyone. You're listening to Aidan Cameron and me, Elizabeth's Media Monthly, the famous podcast that goes on and on about different information about the constant growing media. This month, we're going to talk about all the basic guide to the media sector. This includes topics like structure and ownership, ethical restraints, legal issues, and regulatory issues. As we don't have loads of time, we will only cover the basics of these different topics. But if you ever want to find out more about one specific topic, then please let us know in the comment section and we will cover them in more detail in our future podcasts. Structure and ownership. There are many media sectors in the media industry. Firstly, a media sector is the publishing industry. Publishing is made up of various groups of industries, including books, magazines and newspapers and information services. In the publishing industry, they employ up to 195,000 people, which is around 36% of the creative media workforce. 51,000 people in the newspaper sector. 50,500 works on journals and magazines. 33,000 works in the book industry and close to 12,000 in other information services. Some jobs in the publishing industry include proofreading, copy editor, technical author, writer, event manager, and many more. Secondly, there is the interactive media industry, which is very adaptable and overlaps the other sectors such as television, X Factor or social media, such as Facebook. This sector is worth several billion pounds and employs over 40,000 people. Due to high-paced technology and adaptability, the job roles are unfixed, although some are principal roles such as designer, information architect, programmer, web writer. Thirdly, there is the television industry. The television industry is the most popular form of entertainment and information, but the rapid growth of the gaming industry is a strong competitor. People who work in the television industry come from all over the UK. However, 62% are based in London. Overall, there is no specific gender that works in the television industry. The examples of jobs are an editor, director, makeup artist, and more. Moving on to another sector in the film industry. The film industry is one of the most successful types of entertainment. The film industry also contributed 4.3 billion to the UK's economy in 2006. Film is becoming increasingly popular. In 2007, 516 films were released in the UK. This is a 58% increase in the past decade. Within the film industry, there are four main subsectors: production facilities, distribution, and exhibition. These main roles are filled by smaller and larger companies within the film industry and some highly skilled freelancers. Women make up of 43% of people working in the film industry. Also, the film industry consists of several women make up of 43% of people working in the film industry. Also, the film industry consists of several ethnic backgrounds. In the film industry, the examples of jobs is a director, editor, camera crew, and so on. The radio industry is a distribution of audio content and consists of three different sectors: publicity, funded radio, commercial radio, and community or voluntary radio. The radio industry now employs 22,000 people. There is no majority of female workers in the radio industry, although most of the people who work in the radio industry are highly skilled and well qualified. About a quarter of the workforce are freelancers. Also, most of the workforce are of an older generation. Some are a lot older than employees in the other sectors in the creative media industry. Example of some of the different jobs in the radio industry include being a presenter, such as a show host, broadcast assistant, reporter, and station manager. The computer gaming industry is a large media sector, such as the first games were launched in the 1960s and quickly became firm favourites in the UK by the 1970s. Examples of different jobs are game designer, creative director, animator, and lead programmer. Within the media sectors, there is a variety of media ownerships, and I shall be outlining some of them in this podcast. Firstly, one type of ownership model is public service, also known as PSB. Ownership in media is when a business is owned and run by a government or public body funded by public money. For instance, the BBC is funded by the licence fee. An advantage of this is that the public are funding for the company, meaning there is no money to fall back on. A disadvantage is that there is a responsibility to please the public by having what they want, meaning that the company doesn't have much of what doesn't have much of a say. Another ownership model is private ownership, which is when a company is owned by an individual or company, or in both. An advantage of this is that because the company is owned by you entirely, you receive all the money that is earned. A disadvantage, however, would be that it isn't better funded by public service, as private ownership doesn't receive money from the public. Another ownership model is multinational media ownership, which is when a person or organisation owns more media-related businesses. An example of this is the Times and the Sun. An advantage of this would be that they increase the investment level and income and employment in the host country. A disadvantage is that taxes or tariffs imposed on imports from other countries. Next up is horizontal interrogation, which is the addition of other business activities at the same level of the value chain. An example would be a radio station that owns a newspaper and magazine. On the other hand, vertical interrogation is the degree to which a firm owns its upstream suppliers and its downstream buyers. There are a wide range of issues that is faced by media ownership. Firstly, piracy plays an impact because there is advantages in digital technology which have made piracy easier, cheaper and has improved the quality of the content. The electronic files can be leaked in advance of a film's release. Also, the internet allows pirate material to be distributed all over the world very quickly. Another issue is Hollywood, which is a major issue. Production companies like Warner Brothers, Paramount and MGM are multi-million-pound industries. This enables them to dominate the international film industry as they have vast amounts of money to market and distribute them. They are businesses that are interested in making money, hence they concentrate their efforts into endless sequels. Moving on to the main national and global competition and trends. This refers to increasing companies from other companies which operate from much further away than local companies. This has come about through advancements in internet speeds and digital television. These advancements have allowed for small companies to compete with larger countries that are on the other side of the world. This means that it's harder for companies to establish themselves or keep their customers base as the more popular companies compete from miles away. Trends are patterns and predictions regarding the media industry. To make predictions about future changes and competition differentiations, patterns and studied to identify what trends have occurred repeatedly and therefore predict future changes. Media companies use this to tailor their plans towards their future and allow them to compete with other companies which may be larger and allow them to change their organisational aims at short notice.
Representation of media. In a modern world, it is important to understand and make sure that genders are represented in media, but still has stereotypes of women shown in media and how they appear in the text are shown, because the media industry is mostly made up of men and how they see women and how they expect to act, but this is slowly training as more women get into the media industry. But a big issue is in magazines with women are shown to be perfect and photoshopped, but in reality they don't look like that, and causes women to hold themselves to high standards that they think is normal, but no one is perfect. It also creates the issue of young teenagers not liking themselves as they are, which producers must be careful of. Representation of religious beliefs. In media industry, they must make sure that the main unbiased with the content that they produce, because they can't go around hating random people who they don't agree with, because the backlash could destroy their brand and could cause great damage. But in some situations, okay to be biased because of the terror attacks and because obviously they're going to show that in a negative light compared to being for it. But this could also cause some of the people who heavily believe in that sort of thing and want to cause terror to be more angry with the papers and cause more of an impact because they're that annoyed. With regulatory issues, the BBFC, the British Board of Film Classification, BBFC is an independent, not-governed film classification board, which its main role is to put films into age-based classes of content, depending on the content of the film. The BBC BBFC, originally named the British Board of Film Censors, was set up in 1912 by the film industry to bring consistency within the industry. As the biggest film rating board in the UK, you have to make sure that it stays in line with what the public would find acceptable in each age category, so that every 4 to 5 years they carry out a public research to find out what people actually think of the rating and whether films and video are suitable rated for that age range, and must be able to meet public concerns to make adjustments how they see fit. The main two principles is to protect children and vulnerable adults from potentially harmful, otherwise unsuitable content, and to empower consumers, particularly parents, there's a responsibility for children to make informed viewing decisions, which is what they work by. Impress is a journalism regulator that focuses on digital media like websites and social media. They provide journalists and publishers with protection from the industry to be able to do their job and make sure that the powerful are held to account of their actions if there's any wrongdoing, and giving them confidence and security they need without anything bad happening. So, for example, people with large amount of money trying to ruin the lives of the journalism because they don't agree with it. They also make sure the public can rely on the news for information to inform, entertain and represent the interest for the people, and has a small team who make sure that they're open and transparent throughout what they do, because that's equally important. They operate through a trust journalism program to ensure that they meet high standards of membership and make sure that they address codes and standards that's set out by them. Also make sure that everyone involved is protected from any court costs and damages to the brand. Also helps with the development of new publishers and content through different ways and different means. And make sure that people can't lie to make them better. Mobile Ecosystem Forum, MEF. Mobile Ecosystem Forum is a regulator of mobile phone ecosystem that remains impartial to the issues of the industry. They provide the markets with knowledge and know how the areas of the mobile phones work, and promote trusted business models to bring innovation and bring all the market together. They consist of mobile network operators, software providers, manufacturers, media and content owners, brands that are involved all in the mobile phone industry. Provides a easy understanding across the world, which is based in London.
I'm going to be talking about the legal issues with media. The first one I would like to cover is the Broadcasting Act of the 1990. Made by the UK Parliament, it was to pass the legal framework on the electronic communication. This act is to regulate independent TV, sound programme and other services. In TV Act, it allows channels like Channel 5 to grow with the satellite TV. In the Radio Act, it launches 3 independent national radio stations. The Act had plans to create more national and local radio stations, but it died down after the 2000s. I know members from the parties such as the Labour Party and Conservative parties both didn't like this Act, as they viewed it was too much Americanised and it viewed it as a decline in the average standards of TV and radio. Some even said that it was one of the less successful reforms of those years. Douglas Hood, 2000. The worst effect of this act was that the companies that regulate TV and radio became broadcasters instead. This was due to an independent TV authority not having the power that they should have in the 1900s. In conclusion, this act created 2 licensing authorities, the Radio Authority and the Independent Television Commission, whose jobs are to facilitate the licensing of non-BBC broadcast services. If it weren't for the Broadcasting Act, we would have less channels and less programs than we would today, for example like Sky. Official Secrets Act, 1989. This act makes it illegal for anyone to publish or obtain information that's to do with or about intelligence services or the national security. This act is also to protect those who were servicing in the service or have in the past. For example, you can't publish any information that contains the Secret Air Service SAS unless it involves the offence years ago. This information is because it is classed as an offence to the Crown or the government if a party discloses any information without lawful authority and is considered damaging to the public or the country. The Act protects specific categories like security and intelligence, defence, international relations, foreign conferences, information that can lead to the commission of a crime, and special investigations. If you were sent to court on suspicion of breaking this act, then you would be sent to the High Court, and if found guilty, then you can spend a maximum of 2 years in prison, or unlimited fine, or even both. This applies for members and former members of the services, as if they publish anything without lawful authority, then it would be considered illegal and they would be taken to court for it. However, there is a loophole in this act, as information that is no longer considered important, for example missions that took place during World War II, would not be considered dangerous or harmful to the public nowadays. Or if the person was in the court of law, or if the person was in the court of law or in the parliament, as in both situations they would actually have their freedom of speech, so they can't be held accountable for saying anything in those cases. Obscene Publication Act 1959. This is an Act of Parliament which protects England and Wales from any content that is classed as obscene. In determining whether the prosecution will be in the public interest, the principal factors include the degree and type of obscenity, the type and scale of any commercial venture, and whether publication was made to a child or a possibility that such publications would be like to take place. Attorney General 1997 said that in the Parliament written answer. This act is designed to protect the viewers, like young children for example, from violent and sexual content, and is used for the general public's health, as anything that can be considered as single in a person or group of people can be considered as obscene. Most recent version of this act has even been allowed the police to step in and seize and remove any material that is considered to be a breach of this act. This can be a major controversy sometimes, because it can actually be a breach of someone's Human Rights Act, which I will go on later on. If someone removes content which might be seen as an obscene piece, which actually might just be someone else, it might just be someone's opinion. You can't really say that that's right or wrong in some cases. Video Recording Act 1984. This act states that the commercial video recordings that was offered for the sale or rental must have the classification from the correct authority. For example, movies cannot be sold in the UK without having a classification from the British Board of Film Classification, BBFC, to say that they have seen the movie, they approved the movie, can be sold or rent, and that it must have a certain age category in it. For example, movies cannot be sold in the UK without having the classification from the British Board of Film Classification, also known as the BBFC, to say that they have seen the movie, they approve that the movie can be sold or rent, and also that whoever, only certain age groups can watch it. It is considered offence to the acts if you sell or rent a video recording without a classification from the BBFC, or you sell or rent the movie to a person who's younger than the classification that their video is recorded, like for example selling an 18 rated movie to a 15-year-old. This was originally introduced because the public and political powers were getting worried with all the violent and sexual video content that was increasing in the industry, so the BBFC made it a volunteer thing for the companies to submit their movies to have a age rating, but this only worked with major companies. Smaller production companies just avoid this and continue with releasing movies with extreme violence and sex. The Director of Public Prosecution, DPP, the Director of Public Prosecution, DPP, claimed that these kinds of movies were in the breach of Obscene Publication Act, as I explained before, and he used this as a way to remove the movie or branch it as video nasties. Race Relation Act 1976. This act was introduced to protect people from discrimination, whether it was to do with a race, age, gender or sexual orientation. The act is designed to prevent discrimination and victimization. It was made in 1976 and was amended in the year 2000. That doesn't just cover media, it applies to all regular stuff like employment, education, housing, and even provision of goods and services. The newer 2000 version was notably included on the public bodies to promote race equality and demonstrate that procedures to prevent race discrimination are effective. This act is designed to prevent direct and indirect discrimination. Direct discrimination is when someone treats someone with just because they are a different race, nationality, blah blah blah. For example, refusing to sell the product because of their colour. Indirect discrimination is when someone cannot be shown to be justifiable of the colour, race, nationality, or national and ethnic origins of whom that person is applied to. Human Rights Act 1998. The Human Rights Act was passed so that anyone could protect and defend their rights in the court of law. The act is designed so that we can treat everyone equally and fairly with respect and dignity. The act has three main effects. It incorporates the rights set out in the European Convention on the human rights in domestic British laws, which means that if your human rights were ever in, it incorporates the rights set in the European Convention on the human rights into domestic British laws, which means if your human rights were ever in breach in any way, you could take the case to a British court rather than going to the European court, even if you were in a European country. Another effect is that all public bodies, anyone from local authorities to public schools to police and even high courts, will have to protect your human rights. The other bodies that carry out public functions will also need to protect your basic human rights as well. The third effect is that any new laws passed out by the Parliament will have to compensate. The third effect is that any new laws passed out by the Parliament will have to comply for the Human Rights Act, so that any new laws that has been released has to therefore cannot be in breach of your own human rights. The Licensing Act 2003. This act was introduced to regulate and sale and supply of alcohol, late night refreshments, and different kinds of entertainment. This act was also designed to give the sellers rules on how they can go on about selling their product. For example, no one can just sell alcohol to someone who's under 18. Nowadays, permission to keep all these products you would actually need to one license, which is called the premises license. The Act's objectives is to prevent crime and disorder, set public safety, prevent public nuisance, and to prevent children from harm. Each objective is considered to be very important and is always in the main consideration when the act is involved. However, the legalization also supports the number of other key aims and purposes. These are vital, important. These are fertility. What does that say? These are vitally important. These are important and should be principal aims for everyone involved in licensing work. This includes protecting the public and local residents from crime, antisocial behaviour, and noise nuisance caused by irresponsible licensed police, the nighttime accommodate, and take the action against those premises that they are causing problems to. Communities by minimizing the regulatory burden on business, encouraging innovation and supporting responsible premises, providing a regulatory framework for alcohol which reflects the needs of local communities and empowers the local authorities to make and enforce the decisions about the most appropriate licensing strategies for their local area, and encouraging greater community involvement in licensing decision, and giving local residents the opportunity to have their say regarding licensing decision that may affect them. Fuck me, we should have done a written piece. Privacy and legislation. In UK, there is no statutory right to privacy, such as there's a cause of breach of confidence, which is developed by a tort misuse of private information. This evolution has been heavily influenced by the European Convention on Human Rights. In the UK, this convention has been incorporated by the Human Rights Act 1998. Thank you for listening. I know I was long and boring, but that was just me, Aidan Shoes, talking about the legal issues with media.
I shall now be explaining arguments for and against regulatory issues. I shall begin with ownership and monopoly. Media owners are very powerful figures, which means they can control the limit platforms most of the public use to find out more information about the world around them. Monopolies can seriously limit the number of voices and perspectives available to the public, which is a negative impact. One of the primary purposes of Ofcom is to regulate the broadcast sector and ensure media companies do not own a share of the broadcast media. News corporation's Rupert Murdoch is often accused of using his media empire to present a right-wing view of the world through various news outlets. However, on a positive side, linguist and media theorist Noam Chomsky is one of the many critics of the corporate media. He tries to reflect the interests and perspectives of the most powerful members of society. This is done via a process monopolization of media outlets in large corporations, biased news selection and framing of the news stories to put the elite in a good light. Now, accessibility. Although the internet has allowed increased access to media outlets, many of the most influential media outlets are still inaccessible for most people, which has a negative impact. Alternatively, there have been many initiatives aimed at increasing access to media platforms and diversity initiatives designed to open access to media jobs for people from a variety of different backgrounds. It can be all down to the consumer choice, limiting the amount of voices that have access to media platforms. However, improvements in technology and derogation of the media has increased the number of broadcast channels available to the consumer, which links to Ofcom being the voice of the consumer, ensuring maximum consumer choice for the audience. Now, censorship, taste and decency. Nowadays, it's more difficult to censor a media outlet because the internet has radically decentralised control over the distribution of content. On the other hand, many regulatory bodies exist to control what print, television, radio, film and game producers put out. This means that it's sometimes done through legal means or through self-regulation aimed at ensuring taste and decency. Freedom of information is based on the simple democratic principle that citizens have a right to know about the decisions and actions taken in their name by the people they elect and pay for. Newspapers have used the Act to great effect, shining a light on what goes on. On the side, a huge amount of waste and incompetence has been exposed as a result. That's all we have for you today. Like I said at the beginning of the podcast, if you ever want to find out more about these specific topics, then please let us know, because we want you guys to know all about our media. Thank you for listening and hope you have a fantastic day. We'll see you all next month.